Hi everyone, in today's lesson we're going to talk more about SOH CAH TOA. This time we're going to introduce reciprocal trig functions. So recall that to find a reciprocal of any number, you must flip the original fraction or the given fraction. So reciprocal really means 1 over, 1 over. So 1 over is the same thing as flipping. So the functions that we're used to are sine of theta, cos of theta, and tan of theta. So if you flip them or reciprocate them, so the reciprocal of sine of theta would just be 1 over sine of theta, and the reciprocal of cos would be 1 over cos of theta, and the reciprocal of tangent would be 1 over tangent of theta. Now, these have names. So 1 over sine is cosecant. 1 over cos is secant. And 1 over tan is cotangent. And their abbreviations, cosecant is CSC of theta, secant is SEC of theta, and cotangent is COT of theta. So, in other words, the reciprocal of sine is cosecant, the reciprocal of cosine is secant, and the reciprocal of tangent is cotangent. So what we're going to do now is apply that with SOH CAH TOA. So let's take a look at example number 1. So it says, given the triangle below, find the following ratios and rationalize the denominator if necessary. So the first thing I notice is that we have a missing side. So before I do anything, I would like to use the Pythagorean theorem. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Remember that c squared is always your hypotenuse. The a and b could be the other two legs. So the hypotenuse we know is directly across from the right angle. So 25 is my c. We can call this side a and this side b. So 15 squared plus b squared equals 25 squared. And in the calculator, we're just going to put in 15 squared and 25 squared. So 15 squared is 225, and 25 squared is 625. And to get b squared by itself, we're going to simply subtract 225. And we get that b squared equals 400. And when you take the square root of both sides, you should get 20. So you can go ahead and label the side b that you just found to be 20. So now the rest is just looking at the ratios. So what I like to do first is always write down SOH CAH TOA. So we have SOH, CAH, and then TOA. And we know that sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So here's the theta in which we're speaking about. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight my viewpoint. And let's label our sides. So opposite of the angle, we say is opposite. And right next to the angle, this side, 15, we're going to say is my adjacent side. And we already know that 25 is my hypotenuse. So since sine is opposite over hypotenuse, we're just going to label opposite is 20, hypotenuse is 25. So 20 over 25. Now you should always simplify these fractions. So I can divide top and bottom by 5. So that should give me 4 over 5. Okay, cosine. We know that cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So the adjacent side is 15. The hypotenuse side is 25. So 15 over 25. Again, same thing. We can divide top and bottom by 5. So let's simplify this to 3 over 5. And then last but not least, we have tangent. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So the opposite side is 20. Adjacent side is 15. So 20 over 15. And again, we can divide both top and bottom by 5. So this is going to give me 4 over 3. Now, all we have to do to find cosecant, it'll help if you write it. So this one is cosecant. This one is secant. And this one is cotangent. So these are new words for us, right? These are the reciprocals. So sine, the reciprocal of sine, is cosecant of theta. And we know that reciprocal means to flip. So if sine is opposite over hypotenuse, we can flip it to be hypotenuse over opposite. We know that the reciprocal of cosine is secant. And again, if cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, we're going to flip it because it's a reciprocal to hypotenuse over adjacent. And the reciprocal of tangent is cotangent. So to flip that, if it was opposite over adjacent, we're going to flip it to adjacent over opposite. So I'm just going to fill that in down here. Cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite. Secant is hypotenuse over adjacent. And cotangent is adjacent over opposite. So all we're going to have to do, honestly, is look at our picture. So hypotenuse over opposite. Hypotenuse is 25, opposite is 20. So 25 over 20. And we can divide top and bottom by 5 again. So 5 over 4, which should hopefully make sense because the reciprocal of sine, which is 4/5, is 5/4. Reciprocal means to flip, right? So that's a good way to check to see that your answer is correct. Secant is hypotenuse over adjacent. So hypotenuse is 25, adjacent is 15. So 25 over 15. Again, I can divide top and bottom by 5. So that's going to give me 5 over 3. Again, check your answer. Does the reciprocal of cosine, which is 3/5, does that give me 5/3? Absolutely. And then last but not least is my cotangent. So we know that cotangent is adjacent over opposite. So adjacent is 15, opposite is 20. So 15 over 20. Again, dividing top and bottom by 5 to simplify it. We'll get 3 over 4. And lastly, check your answer. So 4 over 3 reduces and flips to 3 over 4. And that's it. Those are my reciprocal trig functions. All right, let's take a look at example number 2. I will start this one with you, and then whatever we don't finish will become homework. So first things first, we see that we're missing a side. So let's use Pythagorean theorem. So we know that we have the A and the B already here. The hypotenuse directly across from the 90-degree angle is missing. So A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So 19 squared plus 8 squared equals C squared. So take a minute, pause the video, and try to see if you can figure out the value of C. All right, so for 19 squared, I got 361. And for 8 squared, I got 64. And when I added them together, I get 425. And I know that if I want to get C by itself, I have to take the square root of both sides. Now, if you type that into your calculator, the square root of 425, you're going to get a decimal. So what that means is that 425 is not a perfect square. So we have to simplify it. You can go to the y equals in your calculator and put in 425 divided by x. And you're going to look at the table of values. And that table of values, you're looking for a perfect square. So if you do that, you should see a perfect square of 25 and 17, right? So when you look at your table, you should see 17 and 25. Since 25 is a perfect square, that means we're able to break this up into good house, bad house. So the good house we'll say is 25, that's my perfect square, and the bad house is 17. So the square root of 25 is 5, and the square root of 17 we just leave. So C is equal to 5 square root of 17. All right, so we're just going to use that as is. So if you need to, on top of your paper or wherever you need to write it, we're going to write SO, CA, and TOA. Those represent sine, cosine, and tangent. And if it helps, you can put the reciprocal pairs underneath it. The reciprocal of sine is cosecant, the reciprocal of cos is secant, and the reciprocal of tangent is cotangent. Remember, those will be the ones that we flip. All right, so I'd actually like you guys to try to see if you can do these 6 trig ratios. If you have trouble with the rationalizing, that's okay. We can go over that tomorrow in class. Just do the best that you can, and we'll see how you do tomorrow. All right, that's it, guys. Have a great night.